Hello everyone, this is Dr. Rekha, resource person for Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education. This is session 2. In our last session, we looked at introduction to research, role of statistics in management decisions, types of research, and determined when to conduct research. In today's session, in session 2, we will look at the research process. We have briefly looked at the research process in our last session. Today we will look at in detail. In research process, we will look at problem discovery and definition, review of literature, identifying research gaps, formulate research hypothesis. So at the end of the session 2, the students will be able to explain problem discovery and definition, will be able to review literature, will be able to identify research gaps, will be able to formulate research hypothesis. So this is the research process that we have looked at in brief in our last session. The research process, it starts with first problem discovery and definition, then it moves on to review of literature, research and sample design, sampling, data gathering, data processing and analysis, conclusions and report, and so on. We will be looking at each of these steps in detail in the upcoming sessions. So the research process which we have looked at right now, it is little more in detail, in depth we will look at it. The first step in the research process is identifying a research problem, and then it will move on to formulating research objectives, then review of literature, identify the research gaps, develop hypothesis, develop research methods, collect data, analyze data, and conclude findings. Let us start with problem discovery and definition, the first and foremost step in the research process, and which is very vital in any research. There is a proverb which says a problem well stated is half solved. So this is an important and critical step in a research process. If the research problem is discovered and defined at the first stage itself, the further steps would be easier. The further steps would be would be easier to carry out. What is research problem? A research problem is a statement referring to a domain of concern, a difficulty to be removed, could be a specific state to be upgraded, could be an intriguing question, an interesting question that you want to study on. So it's an example could be we would like to study or identify what do mentors learn by being in the mentoring relationships. If we look at it from the rural context, how some of the farmers are able to be more productive than the other farmers, right? So these are some of the examples of a research problem. So identifying the research problem at the very first stage is very important and crucial for any research process to begin with. Okay, let us see how we can define this research problem with an example. So one day I have received a phone call from one of my friend. We studied MBA together, and he knows that I have done my PhD and I am very good in research. He called me. He called me, and he happened to visit Hyderabad. And he called me and he said, Rekha, let us meet at a cafe coffee day. And we met at a cafe coffee day. So he wanted to become an entrepreneur. He wanted help analyzing the data he had collected while conducting a market research study. So he is an hotel management graduate, went on to do MBA. And he happened to visit an exhibition organized by Hotel Management Association in Delhi. There he met an entrepreneur in a stall where he was displaying a tea making machine which uses milk. So he is from Kerala, and he says that as you are also aware, Kerala is a tea loving state, and we have lot of tea making stalls, and but there are these tea making stalls uses tea making machines that uses milk powder, not milk that cannot not using milk. So I saw there is an opportunity to market these product in Kerala. I wanted to become an entrepreneur. So I went on to do a market study, and here it is. So we met in a cafe coffee day. When we met, he presented me with a copy of the questionnaire and asked how he should analyze the data. My first question to him was, what is the problem being addressed? He looked perplexed. He didn't know what to answer. I explained that the data analysis is not an independent exercise. Rather, the goal of data analysis is to provide information related to the problem components. Right? I received a call and we met at a cafe coffee day. I asked him, what is the research problem? Can you define the research problem? He looked perplexed. Right? So I was surprised to learn he did not have a clear understanding of the research problem. So before going further, I asked him to define the research problem. So what is that he wanted to study? What is that he wanted to understand through this market research study? So then he went on to say, Rekha, as you are also aware, that in Kerala, tea stalls use tea making machines which uses milk powder. But now, when I saw there is an opportunity to replace this tea making machine which uses milk powder with the tea making machine which uses milk. So the picture that you see towards the left is that machine that uses tea making machine that uses milk to prepare tea. Right. So I wanted to understand, I wanted to study if tea making stalls, the tea stalls that are there in Kerala would be willing to replace with this tea making machine which uses milk. So that is the problem that he wanted to understand. Then I looked at the questionnaire or the study that he has showed me, he has given me. I found that the data collected was not relevant to the problem. The whole study was a waste of resources. A new study had to be designed and implemented to address the problem defined. Right? So in research process, each and every step is interrelated. It has to be carried out systematically. It has to go step by step. It is not interdependent. Without understanding, without defining the research problem, we cannot go on collecting the data. Then the whole process will go on waste. So it is very, very imperative that at the first stage we define the research problem before we proceed further in the research process. Right. So after defining the problem, we have to go ahead and in defining the aims and objectives related to the research problem that we have defined. Let us look at what are some of the steps involved in writing aims and objectives. The first is state the overall intent of the identified problem. So what is the intention behind the problem that we have seen just now? That he wanted to understand whether the tea owners or the tea making entrepreneurs would be willing to replace with the new tea making machine which uses milk. Right? Emphasize on the motivation behind the research and elucidate all the key tasks that will help to achieve the complete intent. So that is the intent. So if we want to achieve that intent, so what are some of the steps that we have to carry out, or what are some of the questions that we need to ask so that we will receive information for, or we will seek answers for those questions. Then enumerate the main tasks essential to achieve the research purpose, and these tasks are basically the objectives. Objectives should be simple, actionable and measurable against a number of factors. Keep objectives SMART and break down these main objectives to small specific objectives. SMART means specific, measurable, achievable, real and time bound. It has to be specific. Objectives framed has to be specific and it should be measurable and it should be achievable. It should be real and there should be a time bound. Time bound means time period need to be specified. Let us look at an example for how do we frame research objectives. Okay, let's say we wanted to study a study of the student usage of e-books at a ABC University. That is the title of our study. We wanted to study the student usage of e-books at ABC University. What is the aim? There are now numerous scholarly libraries have extended their library arrangement by the obtaining of digital. Due to the change in the situation, if you see this pandemics, everybody or all higher educational institutions have gone online. Now it is imperative that the libraries we extend this digital e-books to the students to so as to facilitate their learning, right. So very little is taught about student observations and frames of mind towards e-books. Therefore, this exploration, this study plans to study students' recognition towards usage of digital books and its utilization. The outcomes will be utilized to give proposals to library management with an aim to improve the nature of administrative arrangement with respect to digital books. Okay. Now, how do we frame research objectives for the context that we have explained just now? So, the first objective could be review the literature on the student experience of usage of e-books. So, our intent was, our aim, the title of the study was, we wanted to understand the usage of e-books by the students, right. So, the first objective is we have to do a literature review on the student experience of usage of e-books. The second objective is investigate perceptions and attitudes of students towards e-books, right. Then comprehend on the students' usage of e-books at the ABC University. So, we have to frame questions based on these research objectives. These research objectives will help us in framing the questions for seeking answers for the title of the study that we have proposed, right. Then identify if any improvements required to facilitate high service quality provision in relation to the e-book service that is existing at ABC University Library now, right. So, now I would like to give an activity to you all. Now, I would want you all to pause for 5 minutes, pause the video for 5 minutes and do this activity. Get a notebook and a pen and write it down. Formulate a research objective for introduction of mobile app for evaluating market rates for their farm produce. Formulate research objectives for introduction of mobile app for evaluating market rates for their farm produce. You continue watching this video only after doing this activity. Pause this video for 5 minutes, formulate these research objectives and then continue watching this video. Okay. So, the next step in the research process is literature review. The next step is literature review. How can we do this literature review? We can review the literature on the topic of the study that we have proposed. Through books, there might be information available in the books, there might be information available on the usage of e-books or advantages or disadvantages of e-books. E-books in the, they might be published those information in the form of books. So, you can search books, get information, and there might be newspaper articles or research papers or articles in websites, blogs. You could also find some of the studies that have been carried out earlier on how, what are the advantages of using e-books than the physical copies. There might be researchers that have studied this and are published in journals. You could look at the websites, blogs, articles, So all these are the sources for doing literature review. You can get information on the topic of the study that you have proposed from these sources, right? So based on these literature review, you would be able to identify the missing pieces. You will be able to identify the research gaps to proceed further, right? So based on this outcome of the literature review, you will identify the missing pieces. You will identify the areas that has not yet been explored or is under explored that you would like to study on. So there might have been studies on the advantages of e-books or the disadvantages of e-books, but there may not be through this literature review you might identify that there were no studies that they have carried out how all the I mean how this e-books at a particular university can be used extensively to facilitate learning. So that could be one of the gaps that you may identify through this literature review, right? So then after identifying the research gaps, you will go on to do for formulating research hypothesis. A hypothesis is basically a statement that presents a research question and suggests a predictable outcome. There must be a possibility to prove true or false. Right? There must be a possibility to prove that whether the hypothesis is true or whether the hypothesis is false. The results of the hypothesis must be reproducible. Right? An example for hypothesis statement could be the farmers who use modern technologies in their farming are more productive. That is the hypothesis. So this hypothesis, after carrying out the study, it could be proved as true. Maybe the hypothesis can be accepted based on the study, based on the analysis that a researcher carries out. He or she may accept this hypothesis or reject it based on the analysis that they do, right? So in the next session, we will be looking at the research design and the sample design. Thank you.